From a closet, also known as the Jim McCarthy Voiceovers World Headquarters Studio, this is the JMVO Weekly Primer. Please subscribe, rate, and comment via jimmccarthyvoiceovers.com/podcast. This is episode 46 of the JMVO Weekly Primer. The Weekly Primer is about making your life better through marinating your mind in good stuff. My name is Jim McCarthy, owner, operator, and chief bottle washer at jimmccarthyvoiceovers.com. Excuse me. And I believe that as business owners and entrepreneurs, we are bombarded by negativity every day, and it's the last thing we need. If you want to see your life and business change for the better, consume nurturing good stuff. As usual, the primer is always brought to you by Big Dot Lighting and Electrical. We are a Middle Tennessee commercial and residential electrical services company that specializes in converting your business to energy-efficient LED lighting. All this month, we're having a special on 150-watt LED parking lot lights for only $2.99 per fixture installed. So if you're a property manager or facility manager, you know what that means for your client and what it means for the ease of maintenance factor for you. Go to bigdotlighting.com to contact us and find out more. So getting into the primer for this week, my guest today harkens back to my beginnings in radio. I've really been talking about that as of late. I first was introduced to the whole philosophy and principles of this particular company and this father and daughter team back in the late 90s when I started in radio. I was actually getting into it, cutting my teeth and getting into production and voiceover and being able to do multi-track editing and all that stuff. That was much more fun for me at that particular moment. But my guest on episode 45, Mr. Matt Carey, Cass Wilson, however many names he's got these days, he was really big into the 22 Immutable Laws of Marketing, which was a huge book. It was almost like the Bible of the marketing world for a very long time and still is. And it's funny because our boss at the time was a very big Christian, and I think carried this book alongside his Bible. That's how much he believed in it. Matt and I would always go back and forth about, the principles of marketing and how I just didn't really see it. And then one day I just sat down and started reading the book, and I instantly was hooked. I got every single word about it and understood exactly what the whole principles of marketing were, and it just brought me right in. So my guest today is Laura Ries, who's a leading marketing strategist, best-selling author, and television personality. In 1994, she founded Ries and Ries, a consulting firm with her father and partner, Al Ries. Laura is a frequent marketing analyst on a major news programs from The Today Show to Squawk Box on CNBC. In 2008, the Atlanta Business Chronicle named you a top 40 under 40. So that's a pretty cool honor as well. Please welcome to the show, Laura Ries. Thank you for being on. Let me get you up here for a second. How are you?
Great. Thanks to be here. That was quite the intro. I'm impressed.
Thank you. If I can impress somebody right out of the box, I try to do it every time, right?
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. I really appreciate it, and it's quite the honor. I hope you could see behind me all the branding that I have going on. I've got the color scheme and everything. I hope you'd be proud. So
I'm always thinking about branding. I'm always looking from the local coffee shop to my son's swim team how brands can be improved and when colors are important. And I love the color texture there of your booth and your branding of yourself as well.
Talk to me a little bit about how you began. I mean, you grew up in the family. Your father was a huge influence for a number of different businesses throughout the 60s, 70s, and 80s. How did that affect you growing up? When did you start realizing that, hey, this is something I might want to consider doing? Was that the trajectory early on revealed to you?
It was pretty early on. I was the only child of my dad's second marriage, so I didn't have any brothers or sisters in the house to pal around with. So I was, more involved with what my dad was going on and with my parents. And I was always fascinated. At the time, he ran an advertising agency, Ries Capital, which was then later Trout and Ries. And I was fascinated. We always talked about branding. We'd watch television. We'd watch the local news and MASH, and we would talk about the commercials. And my dad was always ranting and raving about the good things, the bad things that companies were doing, and the clients he, worked with. One of the clients was Donald Trump, who, drove him crazy, and lots of stories like that. But I knew I was really into it. I wrote. Apparently, I went to my dad's agency, and the art director at the time just had, 5,000 magic markers. It was just amazing because they would draw everything, no computers. And I apparently, was sat down in that chair and was given magic markers, and I made an ad. I made up my own ad and I gave it to my dad, very proud. And apparently I asked my dad 2 weeks later when the ad was going to run. So I was full of confidence that even my, 5-year-old ad was good enough to be out there. But it was always a interest to me. I always loved talking to my dad about marketing, and that was the dream to work, for him, and now alongside him for 25 years has been a dream come true.
So early on, you were being taught to identify, and this is something I can relate to. Back in the early 90s, early 2000s, I was all about, yeah, that's nice, but what's the word that they own in the mind? What's the big idea? And that was, you guys, the whole notion of what you guys did way back when had a huge effect on, I want to say, the radio industry, because a lot of those guys, positioned and branded, all these buzzwords that we use today, which I think is funny. A lot of people I don't think really know what they mean. We'll get into that. But did he understand it? Did he really know about the effect he was having in radio at the time as well?
Well, yeah, no, he was had a lot of support in the radio industry, talked to a lot of industry events. He's on the cover of Radio Inc. magazine. I remember back in the 90s. They were big supporters of the ideas about positioning and using branding principles for their shows and their stations. And so, yeah. And also he was, very supportive of the radio advertising industry in terms of the effectiveness of those ads, because you were listening to it. You weren't maybe getting distracted with attractive images that maybe didn't have the purpose of selling. And so, using jingles, using words, with his clients, even using the medium itself, and the personal nature of it was always a great interest to him.
Have you guys ever gotten involved with Roy? Because there were two books right around the same time when I got into it. In the late 90s, there was the set of the Ries and Trout philosophies and the Ries philosophies, and then there was just came out of the proverbial forest was Roy Williams with the trilogy The Wizard of Ads. Are you familiar with that as well?
Yeah. No, it's been a while, but it's certainly that those were important books and big ideas out there as well.
Well, he was a lot of the stuff that you guys were talking about. I feel like it's not being talked about today. A lot of people talk about branding and marketing, and it seems like everybody's a marketing expert these days. Without, and it's funny because they're all in their early 20s and they're experts already, which I find amazing. I never really considered myself an expert at certain things. I was able to always draw out what a business's true essence was and be okay, keep talking to me. Eventually I'm going to be able to spew it back to you and tell you in the simplest terms what you do and what you probably mean to your consumers, to your prospects. Because a lot of people get so inside the bottle, they cannot figure that out for themselves. You must run into that all the time.
Well, of course, all the time. And it's frustrating. You see when, either marketing isn't thought of as important or it's thought of as too important and not done the right way. But absolutely, it's about what do you stand for? And also, the importance of the category. People, think they're just marketing the brand. Consumers don't care about brands. They don't care about brands. They care about categories. And it just so happens usually the pioneer, then the leader in that category becomes known for it. And people think, do people love Uber? Do people love Red Bull? No, they love the idea of the leadership in ride sharing, the first energy, the leader in energy drinks, Red Bull. It's not that they love Red Bull. They love the concept of the category. And therefore, when the category died, like for Kodak, for example, that was one of the most beloved brands in the entire world. The young people don't remember, like maybe we do. The power of that yellow box everywhere. And they stood for trust, the company said in one press release. No, you stood for photography film. And when photographic film and, taking pictures that way died, so did your brand, and the company went bankrupt. Because no brand lasts forever, especially if you last as long as your category does.
That's interesting. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I never thought about it that way. You look at, there's so many people out there that can't fathom the possibility that Amazon at some point may go away. Because they're like the Sears Roebuck of
that's the analogy. Because nobody believed that Sears could do wrong. Nobody believed that Sears could go away. And look, poof. And at one point, they had, an important decision to make. And I think that's what Amazon's going to come up against as well. Sears was so powerful. And their power derived from their leadership in hard goods. They were, and they had craftsman tools and their own brands. And this was a very powerful direction. And then they, said, oh, we've got this. We own this. Let's expand. Let's expand to the softer side of Sears. Let's go and buy companies. We're going to be these socks to stocks. You're going to buy your socks and your socks from one company, one brand, Sears. That's the kind of arrogance that gets you in trouble, that dilute the brand and set them on the path for future disaster. Believing you can do anything and stand for anything and sell anything under one brand name is the problem. And that's what, Amazon has done a lot of things right. They started with a narrow focus. It was best-selling books, the world's largest bookstore, best-selling books at 35% off. That was a powerful position. They didn't start being everything to everybody. And that's the mistake. It's trying to emulate what companies are doing now at 30,000 feet, which is where Amazon is. That didn't get them off the ground. To build a brand, you got to get it off the ground with a very narrow focus in most cases.
But they've kind of reinvented themselves. They started out, like you said, I always had a trouble. I remember the slogan because it was tough to say, Earth's largest bookstore. And the Amazon wanted to give the image of it being it was like the largest river in the world, not the longest, but the largest, the widest and everything. So I remember those images. That's why they chose it. And then they drew the smile from A to Z, and they started offering everything. They became a mall, essentially. I've been struggling. Okay, what word do they own now? They're no longer a bookstore. They really are all things to all people. People go to Amazon to check and see what reviews are being said. It's the most.
They own online shopping as a general category. The problem is over time, that category expands. It's much like, at one point, IBM owned computers. There was only one kind of computer. It was called a mainframe computer, and it took up an entire room. Over time, things get more complicated. And then there was minis and laptops and desktops and, all sorts of types of computers. And what IBM did was put its IBM name on every type of computer. And, even from the IBM PC, which turned out to be a disaster in the long term. And again, the dilution of that brand by putting it on all things. Now, it was their tree, right? It was computers, but they needed multiple brands for some respects to go after that entire market as what it came to be after 50 years. The same thing is true to Amazon. They own online shopping, but, are they the best shoe place for online shopping? No, the best shoe place is Zappos. They happen to own Zappos, which is nice. But you'll see, different areas where you might get a specialist like that. And having multiple brands like they have for Zappos is a good strategy. What's not a good strategy, and really is the issue I'm concerned about in looking at them, is why are they opening retail stores? If they stand for online shopping, it just goes against nature to see why are they, buying Whole Foods? Why are they, looking at malls and setting up pop-up stores and regular stores? That seems to go against, you always want to have an enemy. Right. That is not good if you're doing online and offline. In the long term, it's confusing.
Do you find that, if you were a betting person, that you could actually wager on some of these decisions and come out ahead? And have you done that in the past or thought about doing that with some of the decisions that these companies make?
Well, I'm not a big bettor, right? I don't like to risk my money, and I don't like to go to the racetrack or Las Vegas or thing. But sure, in terms of our minds, we keep a record of, we told Sears what to do and they didn't listen. Sometimes it takes, for a brand that big and strong, it took a couple decades for them finally to, go out of business. For Kodak, it was the same thing. We talked for years about the issues of Kodak. And Kodak should have launched a second. They had the first digital camera. They had the technology. They weren't slow to move. They just did it with the wrong brand name. So we like to talk about it. We don't want to, go out there and try to, I guess, make money off of those ideas. I mean, we want to help people. We wish they wouldn't go out of business.
Sure, of course. I mean, it's a matter of adjusting the perception. Those are the biggest takeaways I've always kept at the center. There's 22 immutable laws, at least in that book. I can't remember them all, but I knew that there was always a law of the category, the law of the leader. I want to say the law of duality. There can only be two horses in one and it ends up being a 2-horse race. The word in the mind, or phrase in the mind. And you talk a lot, and I did a video on this not too long ago about the concept of positioning. I said, everybody's talking about branding. What's your brand? What's your marketing? And all this. The marketing is the technology, the platforms that get your messaging out there. Nobody seems to be talking about messaging or positioning, which... do you find that to be the case as well? Because I don't seem to be hearing it at all.
Oh, well, we talk about it all the time.
yeah, you do.
Yeah,
but I mean, the marketing gurus out there, everything's about the technology to deliver a pitch.
Well, I think there is somewhat that people are caught up with the latest, gadgets and technologies and social media and how you can use, the tools and tactics. And what they often sometimes forget, and this is, no matter what shiny object is currently fashionable, they forget about the strategy. And strategy comes first. And success is based, on having the right strategy. And when it comes to strategy, it's, what position can you own in the mind? And, did somebody else take it already? Is there an open position we can own? What is the category that we want to dominate? What's the name of that category? Does it make sense? Does it, roll off people's tongue? Is it easy like energy drink, right? Or, does it not maybe make like SUV is not the perfect category name. Sports utility vehicle, I mean, that doesn't roll off your tongue. It became a big deal, but it could have had a better category name. There's lots of things. I think there's, I hate to be, such a naysayer, but, I think people are, they do realize the strategy is important. It's not talked about as much as I would like, as you would like, as many people who understand it. But the right companies, the big successful brands have done the right thing, or otherwise they wouldn't be successful.
That's true. But you probably deal with, typically what kind of companies do you work with?
Well, we work with all types of companies. It's really interesting about our job is that we're not specialists in any one industry or one size of company. We're specialists in marketing strategy, in the positioning, the visual hammer, the battle cries, the verbalizations, the visuals, talking about the categories and how to do the PR and the ideas of creating news value for brands. So we work on the high level marketing, and that is needed for a small entrepreneur who is just starting up. It's needed for, a mid-sized company that needs guidance to many times prune and figure out what to focus on, as well as large companies, that we've worked with, Ford and Samsung and some really major companies in the US and around the world.
Now, one of the books that I read from, I got to check out the most recent ones, but I hearken back to the ones that got me into it. I just started rereading the 22 Immutable Laws of Marketing, and then I got in. I do want to read again the rise of PR and the fall of advertising, which is funny because the sock puppet you used, I can't even remember who he was for at this point. Do you?
I've got him right here in case anyone wants to remember. I've got props here. That was great. I mean, this book came out at the early 2000s, 2002, as a matter of fact, and the .com bubble, and that was the sock puppet for pets.com.
That's right.
And, maybe a little bit too early there with no free shipping at the time. Buying 70 pounds of dog food didn't turn out to be such a good business. Webvan came out at the time, too big, too fast, really. I mean, deliveries of groceries, is something that is here now, but it takes time. And you don't build it overnight. They thought, build a brand or with advertising first and the market will come later. No, it's quite the opposite. You have to build the category, and to change a mind takes time. You can't force something with advertising. And so that book was, still is really important. You can't, change a mind is very difficult, and advertising just lacks credibility, whether it's advertising on TV and whether it's advertising Facebook. It's advertising. Many of these paid influencers, I mean, people see right through it. They know it's advertising. They don't see it in the same way as your friend telling you something or from a trusted news source.
Well, you bring up an interesting point about the influencers out there. They've been around forever, but now they're known as personal brands, which is a very new category, a very new concept. I believe it's really, I remember talking about it back, I would say in 2011, 2012, but it really started getting up on that, what does Simon Sinek call it? He calls it the curve. I can't remember what it's called, but there's early adopters, and then it kind of, gets very popular. But the whole term itself became popular in about 2014, 2015, 2016. Are there any personal brands out there that you find that are just knocking it out of the park? Who do you follow into? And is basically what I'm asking.
I'm not that big into social media. I am on there. I don't follow influencers too much because, I follow the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, and, I read those sources for news and information. And I use social media for what it basically was initially intended for, to check up on my friends and family and see what they're doing and see pictures of their kids and show them pictures of my kids. I'm not sure everyone is obsessed with it as, other people might think. And, we know a lot of those followers are fake. And, what Kylie Jenner's makeup is today, I don't really care. Right. Now, that said, there's a lot of people who do care. And there's a lot of people out there that watch that, but I can't name any.
It's kind of one of the guys that I have always followed. I got introduced to him in 2015. His name is Gary Vaynerchuk. And he talked about, he says, you always get on board. He talks about more about the apps that you can find on your phone and stuff like that. And, he kind of dominated Twitter very, very early on and became very popular there. And then Twitter started dying off. And he says, it's you dominate an app or some sort of technology up until you can, the marketers come in to ruin it.
Yeah.
Which is very interesting.
And it's amazing how it happens. I mean, Instagram in the early days was kind of fun. I would just look at nice pictures and from, friends and family or, interesting, brands that I might follow. But now, every other one is an ad, and that turns people off. I mean, people don't want advertising. They don't like advertising. They'll put up with some of it if they're getting something free and that they feel is of value. But in the long term, it can be very, very detrimental.
See, one of the things I do is I'll go on Instagram, and if I just want to go on a tear, I go into the search category and just browse through all the different pictures that come up. And, as of late, a lot of them have to do with the Avengers because I'm a geek when it comes to the Avengers. It's our family thing, but I'm looking through now and I'm just, whatever catches my eye. And if I'm laying in bed in the morning and just kind of getting up, I'll just kind of browse through it. There's not too many ads there, but I think if you actually click on it, some of these things you'll see, you start going through the listing and eventually you'll come across ads that way. But,
in your feed, there's every fourth or fifth one, I think right now is going to be some sort of paid promotion, right. Which again, people know that it's not... Initially, if you remember with email, and this is a very good example, I think, You've Got Mail. We all had an AOL account. You couldn't wait. Oh my God, you got an email. It was so exciting. You would open anything. I mean, you opened everything. You read everything. And then the marketers got involved, and then you got 5,000 messages, and nobody read anything.
They turned it into Valtech.
So early on, they think, oh my gosh, and some of those brands did very well with the email marketing. But then it gets much, much trickier to do that. And early on, you had some success with, a couple ads on Instagram and you built a $3 billion business. Right? You can't do it that way with just a few ads. You actually have to have a marketing message. You actually have to be, a pioneer in a type of new industry or category that people get excited about. And, you can't buy enough ads to get your message out there. It becomes too expensive. The problem with advertising is that it lacks credibility and it's too expensive. And therefore, building a brand using, PR techniques, creating news value so that it's more than just, paying to have a message out there that people don't want to hear.
Well, again, that's for PR to occur. It's I would say for some reason, I think that's very difficult to attain. It's a lot easier to just put your money into advertising and buy mediums, So how would one go about it? A guy look at us. I talk about confusing the market. You look at my personal brand. I do voiceover and video production and podcasting for a myriad of people. But at the same time, I also own an LED lighting company and an electrical company with a really good partner of mine. Excuse me. And so I get that when people say, okay, on this, you do this and then you do, I go, yeah, I know, I completely violate my own principles in that sense. But for an electrical company like ours, as we're trying to make an impression, we have been doing a lot of advertising on radio and things of that nature. How would we go about, getting that kind of PR attention, which is, I think, the tough part?
Well, sure. I think I'd have to know more about the business and the category and everything else. Mm-hmm. But you put shine the light on me right here.
I'm sorry.
No, that was a terrible pun. But well, first and foremost, having multiple brands is never a bad thing. Right. When you try to do everything under one brand and things that don't, selling, your voiceover work and lighting it with the same brand at the same time is obviously confusing, right? But having multiple brands is not. Having a focus is important. So it's LED lighting, not any kind of lighting. The importance is the category. Again, what is exciting about LED lighting? How is it different? How is it better? What news value is there for using LED lighting, for, paying someone to install it or to, all of those types of things where, so much people get caught up in, how great their business is, how great their product is. You got to do the reverse. Positioning is all about not your mind, not your product. It's about the mind of the consumer, the mind of the prospect. What's in their mind right now? Do they think about lighting? Do they know the difference between lighting? What do they need to know? What do they want to know, or could they know that would make them better informed to understand why your business, your product is better, and then make it easy for them. Have a name that's easy to say, easy to spell. Maybe it has alliteration, has a visual that is unique and different. Again, Amazon was a great name because they connected the ideas. It was the world's biggest river and the world's biggest bookstore. Twitter is, what had made Twitter? Well, it wasn't, everyone had a blog site. Twitter was a micro blog site, 140 characters. They limited what people could do when the internet was allowing people to do as much as they wanted. It was free. You didn't have to pay for print. So it was different. And then they gave Twitter with the bird. So small tweet, bird, locking those things together. Most people don't think enough about what the name is, what the visual is. If you have a name, what kind of, look what happened for there a while with Uber. Remember that ridiculous, weird imagery they had there? Finally they've straightened this company out in many ways, right? But they've got the name and the visual back. So, nice black and just show the name, not a visual that makes no connection to the name whatsoever. Instagram is a great one too. Again, connecting. It wasn't just, Facebook is all types of videos and imagery and messages, where Instagram was just pictures. It was that one perfect Polaroid. And they had the iconic and imagery that launched the brand, and then they simplified it again because they dominate the photo sharing. Branding is just interesting to me. I could talk about this all day.
And I didn't mean to put you on the spot earlier. The reason why I ask is because in the beginning, when we first started getting into the LED lighting space, my business partner and I says, well, what do you want to call it? And I said, I've always had this name in my head, Big Dot. And I thought it would be kind of cool to have bigdot.com and make it stand for something. What it is, I don't know. So why don't we just call it Big Dot Lighting and just go along with that? And we came up with a red and silver, white and black kind of imagery to go along with the branding of it. I said, he said, well, what is the big dot? I said, I don't know. I mean, the big dot in the sky, the sun. I mean, it's similar to that. It's kind of like, lighting of the LEDs or similar to sunlight. So maybe that's the connection. It was literally me just kind of throwing stuff against the wall, but it seems to have worked out over time. And it's funny because I recently had a sit down with a television station, and they were telling us how badly we were doing in SEO. And I said, oh, really? It was actually, I kind of tell people, it was one of the 4 faux pas they made in the meeting, because I designed the website. And I said, and like what you're telling us, I call it be them centric, hashtag be them centric. What does it mean to your audience, your prospects? How are they thinking of you? And I always coach people on their positioning to say, okay, what are people saying about you? If they have to describe your business to their best friend, and maybe, how would they do that? I said, in there, you're going to find a common thread, a commonality of words or phrases to really start from. Instead of starting top down, start bottom up. And think to like what you're saying with how people think of you, your customers and potential clients think of you. And that's where I kind of came into the LED lighting space where, okay, what are people going to search for? What do we call this thing? So my strategy was that, okay, once we have enough money to offensively put the category out there, on an offensive mode with radio or mass media, that was my strategy, and talk about, hey, we are commercial LED lighting conversion specialists, which is a mouthful, I know. And that's what they were saying at this television station. Well, you're not showing up. And I said, well, first of all, yes, we are. Second of all, what are you putting in? Because I'd really love to know. What are you searching for, And that's a challenge with any new category, I would imagine. Okay, I know what I would search for because I'm inside the bottle. I'm inside of this thing. That doesn't mean everybody else is going to use those terms. You know what I mean? Is that something you come across as well with a lot of different businesses, new ones?
Well, I think it's important to have outsiders help when you're developing that. One thing when you start a business, when you're an entrepreneur, you know too much about it. Yeah. It's hard to think about how some newbie would go to the computer and what would they search for. So having someone to work with, I mean, even if it's just a friend who doesn't know a lot about your business, but might be a potential customer or prospect, to have their feedback is helpful. And one of the big mistakes, of course, particularly, like you said, if you're thinking about, the importance of people finding you online and perhaps buying from you online, too often is, the idea of using generic names. And that was the rage in the .com era, .com and others, that they didn't think about the brand. They were so concerned about the search. They thought the generic books.com, pets.com, business.com was the best way to go. But people want brands. They might search for pet supplies or dog food, but a brand name is a stronger position in the long term to own. A brand name like Uber, for example, is better than the generic word, I think, Lyft. Right. Again, the same space, and Lyft has done a number of things with color and other things. But the name itself, Uber, rolls off the tongue and sounds more like a brand name than a Lyft.
Well, Uber also became a verb over time as well. Yeah. Yeah.
The leader and pioneer in a category, if their word choice is a good one, very quickly does become, like you said, that verb, like a Google.
Mm-hmm. Google, Xerox.
Yahoo didn't. Do you Yahoo anything?
No.
And if you do, I don't want to know.
Yeah. Hey, check me out on my MySpace page.
Yeah.
Back on Friendster. When you get started with a brand and you're starting to work with a company, are you kind of open to all medium channels, or is that even a possibility of discussion at the first couple of meetings, or do you kind of figure that out later?
Well, we do just the overall strategy part. So we're not working long-term with clients on implementation, but of course, we're making recommendations. And there's never one perfect medium. It all depends on the category, on the brand, the place in the market. Are you the leader? Are you number 2? Are you 3 or 4? What type of resources do you have? So depending on the category, then you make the determination on what the best medium might be. But again, if you're starting a brand, our recommendation is no advertising. Don't waste your resources on that. You could spend it on other things. Advertising in general is a defensive mechanism. It's what you do to defend your brand. So when you are large, like Starbucks didn't advertise for 20 years. They didn't have to. They got plenty of PR, buzz, and word of mouth. They were, a pioneer in a new category, many of which people said wasn't even going to work. Expensive coffee. I remember in Manhattan, they said it was never going to work. People were paying 50 cents a cup. They didn't want Starbucks. Well, they're in a corner now, of course. So, for 20 years, they relied on the PR. But after time, how many stories can you write? Everybody knows about you. There's no buzz left, right? The PR. That's when you turn to the defensive advertising strategy and to keep out the competition. And now, of course, you see Starbucks advertising everywhere.
Yeah, and but they're still also doing business the way they used to. They've always done it, And that's a curious concept. Is even over the long haul, can you continue doing business that way, or does it become generationally irrelevant? Sears Roebuck, obviously they expanded and expanded and expanded. It's really just they became so just shotgun wide that we didn't know what they stood for anymore. Amazon, like you said, they're the number 1 online e-commerce site. But what does that mean 20 years from now? How do they continue to own that position in the mind? Are there any brands like that are kind of like, if you had to get in front of somebody and say, and kind of shake them and go, just who would you have anybody in mind you'd love to get in front of and say, just stop what you're doing? No, this is bad. Right.
Of course, there's a lot of people like that.
This company I just came across, Big Dot Lighting. Stop what you're doing.
Yeah, no, well, yeah. There's, well, sure. You could, one brand that we've talked a lot about, Coca-Cola, for example, and if you know the history, a very interesting history of the brand, and they have built such one of the most powerful brands in the world, and for many years was the number 1 brand in the world. It is slightly slipped. Why has it? Is it the Coca-Cola bottle not attractive anymore? Does it not taste good anymore? No, they're the category issue. People don't want sugar. They think sugar is public enemy number 1. And what was public enemy number 1 in the 1900s? And Coca-Cola was accused of having it in it. No, they thought cocaine was in it.
Cocaine, that's right.
And there was a lot of bad publicity about, and there was some sort of slight minutia of extracted something or other cocaine. And how did Coke fight that? They took it out. And they said, don't worry, there is no cocaine. They actually said there never was, but, that is debatable by history. But
still tastes good, just not as much fun.
Yeah, and that was the response. And now they face the crisis with sugar. And what do they do? Their reaction has been, to have 35 different flavors and varieties of Coca-Cola, from multiple types of sugar-free to half and half to full sugar, and try to say it's all on you. We're giving you a choice, right? It's not our fault you're drinking too much sugar and making yourself sick. They could have the same reaction and go to no sugar product, and say, we're just gonna cut out it. And they've got a product, Coca-Cola Zero, that a lot of people like, but it's saddled with the zero name. And there's a mental, when you put the word diet, when you put the word light, when you put the word zero on something, it's just not going to taste as good. It's not the real thing. The real thing without the sugar, if they got away with the sugar product, could be a potential big seller.
Would it be? Well, that's the thing, is that if you bring in the law of candor and say, look, it's got sugar in it, but that's what sold it for us. So treat yourself, kind of thing. It's okay to have sugar once in a while because you're going to find it somewhere. That kind of an approach. Because I remember one of the most intriguing things you guys had uncovered was the brand extension, line extension, was that Diet Coke, and what message is that really sending? And it's as relevant today. Yeah, that Coke is bad for you. And Pepsi did the same thing, and they had Diet actually Pepsi at one point had Tab. I think it was
that was Coca-Cola. That was Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola had Tab, which was a big seller. It outsold Diet Pepsi, and that's a very good point. Coca-Cola could have avoided this had they. Tab was very pink and very feminine. Didn't see the future where everyone was a potential market for a zero sugar, zero calorie product. Had they had a traditional second brand with a name like Sprite, that was universal, was a cola product without the sugar, and they could have just transitioned to that. But here, Coke Zero and Diet Coke, they were connected. You couldn't separate them. And they both undermine each other because, Diet Coke, doesn't taste as good because it's diet, and real Coke has too much sugar and is bad for me. So you make people, it's a bad choice. The same is true with, Budweiser, Bud Light, and Bud Light, it's got less calories, but, it doesn't taste good. And Budweiser has too many calories and too many carbs.
But it tastes much better.
I'll have bottoms and enjoy myself.
It's funny because in my family, we'll go out and get a case of Bud Light just because as our, cheap beer. And we'll treat ourselves to the Sam Adams, which, it's like, if you really think about it, well, why don't you just buy a 6-pack of Bud? And whenever you have an actual beer that's like a Bud or, just a straight ahead beer, you forget, wow, this actually does taste pretty good. You forget how bad the other stuff tastes. The extremes work much better in marketing than what we call the mushy middle. And many brands are stuck in the mushy middle. People either want the best or they want the cheapest. And most brands are right there in the middle. It's a little like, the problems that Kroger are facing, right? It's people either wanted Whole Foods, right? They want the best, willing to pay a little bit more for it and have organic food, or, they want the cheapest and they were, driving to Walmart, or now they're going online. And Kroger was right there in the middle. You had to drive there, but it wasn't the cheapest. It wasn't the best. What is I don't know what it is. It's there, but many people are driving by and using other things. And that, again, line extension is the biggest ill in marketing. It is used. It's a crutch, I think, in some cases where for marketing managers that want to do something and be active. I mean, if you work at Cheerios, I mean, nothing will keep you busy than launching a new flavor of Cheerios. I mean, I think they have 25. Ancient Grains, who even knew that was a flavor? I can't believe the number of flavors they come out. Maple syrup. I mean, they've got all sorts of things. And again, you see that most significantly in categories that are declining. Sugar cereals and cereal in general is declining. Cigarettes are declining, but Marlboro's got Marlboro Medium, Marlboro Light, Marlboro this, Marlboro that. Coca-Cola has, a whole aisle. I mean, try to find the flavor you like. I mean, it's mind-blowing. I mean, forget it. Just give me a water. Well, are you familiar with In-N-Out Burger?
Of course. Of course. That's one of our favorite examples.
I know.
Because they did the opposite of what McDonald's did. McDonald's continues to spend a ton of money adding, things to their menu that hasn't really changed the bottom line at all. Whereas, what they could have done if they had stuck to the simple menu items like In-N-Out Burger has done. Or guess who's beating McDonald's pants now is Chick-fil-A. Chick-fil-A focuses on fried chicken sandwiches. They've got a few other things, but they're not trying to sell everything to everybody. You want chicken, you come to Chick-fil-A. Chicken sandwich.
Yeah, chicken. The home of the original chicken sandwich. To me, Chick-fil-A means chocolate milkshakes because they have some of the best of them out there from a fast food perspective. But you're absolutely right. And tell me a little bit about what Ries and Ries is doing to move forward for the next 10, 20 years. Like, what are some of the plans you have, what you're working on?
Yeah, well, we're always, working on, we work with clients, but we're always working on concepts and actually, a new book hopefully coming soon, but was just released in China because China is a big important market. They're getting very interested in not just copying stuff, but building brands of their own, actually. But positioning for the 21st century, positioning was the articles were, from 72, but the book came out in 1981, really kind of changed, like you said, how people thought about marketing, that it was, the importance of owning a word in the mind, the importance of looking in the mind, not just thinking about what you wanted to say. But how has that changed? I mean, the world has changed significantly from 70s and the 80s, right, to today. We've had a lot of changes, and things like the category are even more important. And we've had, of course, the rise of the internet. How do you handle it? Do you try to be all things and online and offline, or should you pick one or the other and dominate that and do the best of that instead of trying to be good at everything? That doesn't work very well. And long term, the specialists tend to dominate.
Do you think we're living in the era of the personal brand? Is the personal brand more important than the corporate brand?
Well, I don't know what you mean by personal brand. I mean, I think there's best corporations are those that own multiple brands. Mm-hmm. And, you can leverage that size. And what you do see, and that this is actually a very good point, a big part of positioning that we've seen definitely come true, is that the last century was dominated by single brand companies, IBM, right? And Sears, and Coca-Cola. Single brand, they put that brand on many things. In this century, I think you're going to see the multiple companies that own multiple brands dominate. Even Apple is not a single brand company. Everything isn't an Apple. They have different brands for each category. It was the iPod, it's the iPhone, it's the Macintosh. So all of those are different names for those different categories. I mean, compare that to their competitors. I mean, Samsung, that's from, a cell phone to a dishwasher, to, all sorts to a television. They've got one name on those. And that strategy of using one master name on everything, was dangerous in the last century. It's just not even going to work in this century.
It's not going to work. So you're saying the singularity is more important coming up?
Well, yeah, that brands need to, as brands need to narrowly focus as much as possible. Expanding outside the category becomes a very dangerous thing in trying to do many things.
So you bring up an interesting point about Apple. Here they are, they were a computer company, and then Steve Jobs got back into it, and we all know what happened. And, he put his innovation and his thoughts into the product development, and they rolled out the iMac, I believe, and it was kind of colorful and then
simplified.
Simplified. And what they really did was obviously the iPod came out, and that changed the entire world. And I remember going through this, I'm like, but they're a computer company. How did they make that transition and people just accept it? I mean, they within the creative circles, Apple became the go-to technology, because if you were a creative, a photographer, a videographer, things of that nature, graphic artist, and you didn't have a Mac, you were not even in that fraternity. Right. So, I mean, but
for a while, and they did survive for a while by being that sort of artistic. But even then, before, they were almost out of business before Steve Jobs came back, because they couldn't they had too many models, too many names. It was too confusing. The technology started to break down. And Steve Jobs came in and he simplified it to, we're not going to have, a crazy long list of computers with names that don't make sense. He simplified it to two consumer brands and two professional lines, right? And then what changed the world, like you said, was the iPod. Again, it wasn't an iMac music player, right? I mean, it was a new brand for a new category. And not only that, don't forget what made it was at the time, there were tons of competitors in Flash. music drives, right? Everyone had
Yes.
flash. I mean, that was cheaper. It was more, reliable in some cases. So everyone was on flash, and they did the opposite. They did the hard drive player. What was the advantage? How did they say it? How did they communicate it? 1,000 songs in your pocket, 1,000 songs in your pocket, and each song was 99 cents. It was the package of all those things. Nobody was thinking about, this is a computer company. No, this was an iPod. This was something totally different. Yes, it happened to come from Apple, sure. And, that generated some PR, but it was the new idea, new category, the hard drive, the 1,000 songs in your pocket. They executed flawlessly, and they had white earbuds, right?
Yeah.
I mean, even simple things like that. Everyone did black because black blended in, and Steve Jobs knew the opposite. He was amazing in the sense of knowing those little things and knowing the importance, and being able to see how in the future that 10,000 songs or 1,000 songs, now 10,000 in your pocket was going to be a huge advantage and a huge game changer. And people would be willing to pay for it.
What kind of books do you marinate your mind in at the moment? Do you read a lot? I like to read about company histories. I mean, that's where we, are following, online and articles and, just keeping up to date with what companies are doing. And we get a lot of the trade, nations, restaurant news and beverage world and finding out, what companies are doing and keeping up with them. That's what I like to read and find out about and watch TV shows about. I think it's interesting. We all, like to work with our clients, but following what's going on with these major companies and the decisions they make and long term, how that works out, is incredibly interesting. Is there any company that's kind of below the radar that you're just loving right now? That you're kind of like what do they call that? A mega fan that nobody knows of. What company that we should be on the lookout for that's just doing it right? Yeah,
I don't know that I know anything that's under the radar, so to speak. But the one brand that I personally love right now is Peloton. Although I will say I was not impressed when they launched the tread. Peloton is a bike, an amazing experience. The bike, the programming, everything about it, they're just killing it. And then I think they line extended too early. They're going into this treadmill and then yoga, and I'm like, what are you guys doing? There's an advantage in, again, you can have some expansion into, I do an extra weight workout after just while I'm sitting on the bike. But having a big treadmill in my house versus having this small, sleek bike is totally different. And really, again, I think, you get swept up and everybody knows about it. No, they don't. And making the experience and having the content for multiple devices becomes a lot more complicated. So it's, I fall in love with something and then they do something silly and I get sad.
Yeah, and I can see that too, because I mean, you remember when Dollar Shave Club came out back in 2013? They had that amazing video and it hooked me. I mean, it was one of those impulse buys that I just went out and joined them. I've been a member ever since. I recently went to their website to change up some of my subscription and add in a razor handle. I think I needed an extra one. Mm-hmm. It took me 10 dang minutes to find out how to I'm like, what happened to the original? Where did it go? You got face creams, you got this, now you got toilet paper, for crying out. What?
Oh my gosh.
What?
That is the tragedy.
Why do people do? Why do they do that?
I don't know. What is wrong? And that's where you go back to In-N-Out Burger. What is wrong with just the burger? There's a simplicity of doing just that and doing it really well, and that can last for a really long time versus trying to throw in the consumer's face everything you can possibly think of instead of being a specialist in that one thing that you do the best, and making it then, like you said, I find the same thing with Amazon now. I'm getting overwhelmed to just negotiate my way around that website. It used to be, so sleek and new and, better than any other online experience. But, for certain products where I know there's a Chewy, I'm going there to buy anything pet related because I can't find it on Amazon. I can't find the good advice for the pet stuff. And at Chewy, the prices they're good enough. I mean, That's and Chewy's another one I like as well.
Well,
but
being a fanboy, a fanboy of you and your dad from very early on, as well as being a fanboy of I'll say the Ries camp and the Wizard Academy Wizard camp. I would love to see a colliding of worlds in a way. I think you guys could really collaborate and really do amazing things if you ever make that happen. One of the books that came out of that camp, though, is called Pendulum, and I'd recommend it to you. It talks exactly about what you're talking about, generational thinking and a 40-year pendulum swing, and how we go from a we society to a me society. And they've predicted the last 5 presidential elections accurately before the primaries based on this ideology. It's amazing. Very, cerebral type of stuff. And a lot of what happened with this particular book, they take it back 3,000 years and point out the cultural nuances that point to those virtues, a we or a me, and what they all mean. And neither one are good or bad. They just are. And they say in 2023, we're going to be living through 1943 all over again. That's all I'll say. I would recommend it to you, and hopefully it'll blow your mind, and you'll be like, man, I'm glad I talked to that guy, Jim. So, but Laura, I want to thank you for being on. How do people get a hold of you and connect with you?
Well, that's easy. It's Ries.com. It's RIES. You can find us. You can find our books or contacts or anything like that. And, we're out there, and we'd love to hear from you. Pick up a book. I think they're, like you said, they're great advice. We love to share that knowledge. And if we can't work with you as a client, give that to you in a book to help you go. I mean, the future of our country, our country is built on brands and companies and entrepreneurs, and the future is going to belong to the ability of us. We do it better than any other country in the world, right? Over 50 of the world's top brands are, from the United States, and it's something to be very proud of. But, we got to continue to rock and roll in terms of doing it the right way, building brands with great names, great visuals, and great identities.
So is it safe to say that the Ries family legacy is inventing the word and the concept of positioning?
Absolutely. Positioning is the legacy for sure. It's around a while. It's going to continue to be important. And that's a good one.
Well, I see that on the website you have a books page. I'm going to put that down below in the description so you can look at books like I've read in the past. Now it's all coming back to me. I want to reread all these books. Focus, The Origin of Brands, Visual Hammer, which I have yet to read, Battle Cry, The Fall of Advertising and the Rise of PR, which again is just so spot on. 22 Immutable Laws of Branding, Marketing, all the great stuff that we've been talking about. You can find from that link down below in the description box as well. Of course, brought to you by Big Dot Lighting. Check us out, bigdotlighting.com. Also, please, if you like the podcast, share it out. Encourage your friends to listen. Let us know what we need to be talking about, and hopefully, let me know what you're marinating your mind in, because I always like to, glean off that as well, and marinate my mind in it, because whenever we marinate our minds in good things happen. I believe that. So definitely share it out, like us, subscribe, rate, all that good stuff to the JMVO Weekly Primer. I forgot my own name. Laura, thank you so much for being on with us today. I really appreciate you taking your time with us.
Yes, no, it's my pleasure. Always love talking marketing.
This is the JMVO Weekly Primer. Please subscribe, rate, and comment via JimMcCarthyVoiceovers.com /podcast.